Hi guys, it's Miss Meyer, and today we are going to talk about the West African Kingdoms and the African Empires. So that's what's today on the Miss Meyer Show. Well, the empires of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai are all thrived in Western Africa, and they were in a fertile area of Africa south of the Sahara Desert near the Niger River. Now, a lot of people don't know this, and they don't, well, it's just not known, I guess, but there were kingdoms and king empires and huge rulers and kings and queens of Africa. And one of those empires was called Kush, which just so happens to be our code word of the week. So the first empire that we're going to talk about in West Africa is the Empire of Ghana. Now, Ghana existed from around 300 AD to around 1100 AD. Now, by 800 AD, they controlled much of the trading in West Africa. So they were pretty much like your ancient Rome at the time of Africa. Gold and salt were the two most important goods traded by Ghana. Salt was so important, well, obviously, gold was important because it's gold, but salt was important because salt was able to preserve meat. They didn't have refrigerators back then, so if you wanted to keep your meat fresh so you could feed it to your family, later on, you would have to preserve it. You would have to make it last. And what they would do is salt and pickle meat so that it would be able to be eaten over periods of time. And so that's what they did. And basically, a lot of times the meat rotted, even with the salt. So they would just cut off the rotten part and they'd give it to their families that way. So, but salt was super, super, super important, especially to flavor dishes, to preserve food, all kinds of things. Attacks by the Almoravids, and I'm probably saying that wrong, the Almoravids, Almoravids, in 1076, it led to the decline of this big Ghana empire. So they were really, really big until another tribe came and took them over. Mali gained control of West African trade routes after the fall of Ghana. Now, they were powerful from the 1200s until the 1400s, and this was the source for almost half of the world's gold during the 14th century. So this is where they had lots and lots and lots of gold were here in Africa, and they were supplying the rest of the world during this time, mainly with the gold. They traded gold for salt. When I'm telling you salt was a major, major thing, I'm not lying to you. Salt was so useful because you can't eat gold. You can't. But you can preserve things with it so that you can feed your family. So in an area that is prone to famine and to things like that, as some places in Africa are, the salt was extremely useful in making sure your family had enough food to eat. History and traditions here in Mali were passed down through storytelling. There wasn't a lot of writing, a lot of written records here in this empire. We have the majority of traditions are passed down from word of mouth. Kind of like you ever hear the story, a story your grandpa told you that you told your kids. I know that stories my grandpa told me, I tell my kids, and I'm passing it down that way. Or this is called oral tradition. You're passing it down through word of mouth. A pilgrimage to Mecca, led by Mansa Musa, and that was the leader, made Mali more well-known on an international level. A pilgrimage was a religious journey. And Mansa Musa, who was one of the leaders of Mali, made this journey. And as he was traveling to Mecca, which was like the holy land of his faith, he spread his culture. He spread information about Mali all around. Okay? They developed, and this is, I know you guys have heard this, a place in Mali called Timbuktu. Y'all ever heard that? I know there are certain places in Louisiana where I say, oh, I'm in the middle of Timbuktu, meaning I'm in the middle of nowhere. Timbuktu was a real place, and it was established by the Mali Empire. and it was developed as a center of learning, and it was built. They built here a huge library for the University of Sankore. So here in West Africa, a huge empire in Mali, in Timbuktu, was a major university where lots of books and material and lots of knowledge and learning would go on in Timbuktu. It was a very, very huge place to, have material. And in fact, like Alexander the Great and all the kinds of things, he would study at some of these places. Now, Mali Empire began its decline after the death of their leader, Mansa Musa. I just like the way that sounds. And it started to decline and shrink in size. They started this huge empire that spread all over the place, and once their leader died, they started to get smaller and smaller and smaller. Now, Songhai ruled this empire. It ruled from the late 1400s until the late 1500s. Now, their first king was Asikia Muhammad, and they were introduced to the laws based on the teachings of the Quran. So in this area of West Africa, these empires were really focused on Islamic teachings. In the European empires at this time, they were focused on the rules of Christianity. So you had two different religions. And this is during the time, around this time, we start to see crusades. People trying to spread Christianity, and lots of different kinds of clashes between two religions start to happen during this period of time. So that's what was going on worldwide. Now, the Empire of Songhai, their laws were based on the teachings of their holy book. And eventually, as time went on, they were conquered by the Moroccans, and their empire, too, fell down. So you had you had Ghana, that was first. Then you had Mali. Then you had Songhai. And then you have, after Songhai declined, you have the Moroccans from Morocco, which is also on the African continent, or is taking over the Songhai Empire. Now, next thing we're going to talk about, because we're going into that next, when we talked about the Civil War and all that in American history, but now we're going to talk about how it is in world history. Well, in America, during this time, in the 1800s, really, as time went on, they started having slave labor, and not only in America, but all over in Europe. And you remember, they were having slave labor in Greece and Rome. But as these countries, as these empires started to decline, and we start to see smaller countries popping up, like, your England, France, the United States, lots of the labor is done with the slave trade. Now, the African slave trade was perpetrated to make money. That's what it was. Camels from Arabia, from Saudi Arabia, which is on the Asian continent, were used to transport slaves across the Sahara Desert. The interaction with these Muslim traders brought the religion of Islam to West Africa. So this was another way that interaction would spread thoughts and ideas. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to be involved in the Atlantic slave trade. So not the Americans and not the British, it was the Portuguese who were the first to be involved with the Atlantic slave trade. Okay, so the I'm not saying, I'm not diminishing slavery whatsoever, but it has been around for, it was around for quite some time, long before the Civil War even started. So that's all I've got for you guys about West African empires. This is a super short lesson. You should do extremely well on your Miss Meyer show, and on your quiz and your guided notes. I will see you all when we come back from Thanksgiving. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I will see you guys in what? No, it'll be November 30th. So I'll see you on the 30th of November. Bye, guys.